Welcome to the morning feed. Today is Missing Monday, and we are doing our second episode of the disappearance of Kemberly Raymer from Opp, Alabama. In our last episode, we went over some of the key details about her disappearance, and we're doing this a little bit differently than what we normally would by trying to pack as much as we can into one episode, but we're doing this for a reason. There's a method to our chaos here. We would like to keep Kemberly Raymer's face and story as relevant as possible, and the media mostly reports on Kimberly's case during, milestone events like her disappearance anniversary, and when key things happen in her disappearance in the case overall. So we want to do this a little bit differently than what they are doing it because we would like to keep her name and her face out there. Now, in our last episode, we mentioned that Kemberly Raymer lived with her father at the time of her disappearance. I'm going to go recap a few of the key details in just a moment, so stay with me. But what I didn't mention is that since her disappearance, Kemberly Raymer's father has passed away. And Kimberly's mother is really leading the charge in trying to seek where Kemberly is and justice for what may have happened to her. Now, it is solely the job of the public to keep interest alive as the media works at a high-speed, chaotic news cycle. The rate of the changing news cycle is beyond belief anymore. It's very difficult to keep up with, and that is their job as media professionals who work for various networks. That is their job, to keep up on the news. The news is always changing, though, and we have in 1997, when Kemberly Raymer disappeared, what would have been a huge headline, for instance, just recently we saw Susan Smith from South Carolina go up for parole. She was convicted of taking the lives of her two young children in a very malicious, horrific way, including the details of how she handled everything afterwards. Everybody who knows that case knows the details are really bad. But for those who know that case, Susan Smith was a huge name, a huge story, and it was a very big deal at the time. Those types of stories happen on a regular basis now, though, and not all of them make major media. Not all of them make national headlines. Some of them aren't even really known about. That's difficult. That's difficult to digest. But back to Kemberly Raymer, that is the job of the media. But we're the public, and as independent journalists, independent podcasters, investigative reporters, whatever your position is within that, I am able to report on Kemberly Raymer's disappearance in the way I see that it's most logical. I don't consider this a cold case at all. There is information to work with. There are things that could be done to try and progress this case. Now, are there in fact people out there who know things who have never said anything? We can't say for sure, but we can assume the likelihood, the probability of whether there is or not. And we're going to get into a little bit of that today. First, let's talk a little bit about recapping the details that we talked about last time. So, as I mentioned, 1997, Kemberly Raymer, she was a teenager. She was going into her senior year of high school, preparing for college, and doing all the things that a senior in high school is enjoying doing. Hanging out with their friends, doing sports, doing senior pictures, just the gamut of normal things that a senior in high school would be doing with their life at the time. Now, I also mentioned that in one media article, Kemberly Raymer's mother mentioned that Kemberly had it made. And that really speaks to, the concerning nature of her disappearance. She had no reason to walk out, leave, and not tell anybody. She also appeared to have no motivation to do such a thing. And she was close with her family, close with her friends. She was very active in school, in sports, and going back and forth from Alabama, where her father and she lived together, over to Florida, where her mother lived. Just a short drive from their home in Alabama. She was able to drive to her mom's house and also spend time with her. She had a very busy life. She was also seemed to be well liked by her friends, by her inner circle, her family. Her family seemed to have a trusting relationship with her. They would trust her to be home alone, to come home when she's supposed to come home. And that's kind of why she had it made. You know, you follow the rules and we will take care of you and help you in every way that we can. So she seemed to have a good relationship with her parents and her family in general. So when she disappeared, nobody really gave a whole lot of thought to, well, did she run away? It was immediately a major concern. If Kimberly's mother didn't know where she was and Kimberly's father didn't know where she was, there was a problem. Now, after they noticed that she disappeared after coming home from her boyfriend's house sometime in the middle of the night. There were definitely noticeable changes with her room. I don't want to say that her room was tore apart or anything else, but there were noticeable changes. Now, aside from those noticeable changes, there was also some phone calls that were placed from the family's house that night. Those phone calls relate to a person of interest in the case, possibly, because those phone calls could speak to who our person of interest is in this situation. Now, the person I'm going to be speaking about today has been widely talked about, and this is actually something that we do not normally do. We do not normally go into details or conversation or debate about a person of interest, especially a person of interest. And I mean that as in a person of interest versus a suspect. So we do not normally go into this level of conversation and debate and discussion about it. There's a lot of online chatter about this individual. We're not going to be naming them or putting up their photo, just so everybody knows. If that's what you're looking for, there are other places you can go find that now. Eventually, we'll get into more of the finer details of this overall situation. I want to have a conversation with someone before I go further into that. So for now, we're going to discuss some details about our person of interest. And he seems to be kind of the only really logical person of interest at this time. Now, this person is also connected to the family. He's also connected to the area where the calls were placed to the night of her disappearance. So there's a lot of connections here between Kimberly Raymer's disappearance and this person of interest. One specifically that I'll get into in just a moment. Making sure that answers come for Kimberly Raymer is really the job of the public at this point. Kimberly Raymer's father has passed away. Her mother is really leading the charge to try and find her and also get secure justice. And the media sees cases like hers as cold cases, and we don't have to. And we don't have to follow the high-speed news cycle here. We can actually stop and settle in and really get ourselves acquainted with certain situations and help drive information. And that's why we don't always talk about a person of interest the way that we're going to right now, because I'm quite methodical about how I put out information about a disappearance or any ongoing criminal matter, because I want to put out information that's going to help lead to answers. I don't want to just put out information for the sake of debate or discussion or saying, hey, I know this over here or I know that detail and you don't. That's not what this is about here. I have over 20 years of doing this behind me. I really have no interest in the drama and theatrics of it all. So We like to just stick to what's really, really needed in order to bring these answers. And then once that happens, if the family wants to open up and we want to really talk in depth about the story, how it started, what happened, where it ended, that's different. But we will never be the one to put out information that we feel could harm an investigation. There's a lot of chatter online about this person. I can see why. It's understandable. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes social media really runs with something, but that is just not logical. But this is illogical. And as I get into this, I would like to detail the fact that my heart goes out to this family. Um, her father did not get to see answers, know where his daughter was, or ever properly say goodbye to her. And then there's Kimberly's sister, who at the time of Kimberly's disappearance had a boyfriend. And that boyfriend, who she is no longer with today, is the person of interest we're going to talk about. So while we're not going to name him, I will confirm it's not somebody different from what everyone else in this case has been focused on. It's the same. I just am not ready to name him on this platform before I have a further conversation about Kimberly Raymer's disappearance with someone. So for now, let's get into our person of interest. He is, of course, known to the family because he dated Kimberly's sister. And at the time, he had quite a criminal background and he had past and present charges that he was dealing with. He was out on bond. He also had connections to the area where the phone calls were made from Kimberly's house the night of her disappearance. So let's get into that for just a second. These calls were made from a landline. We're talking 1997. This wasn't done on a cell phone. These calls were made on a landline, and when they discovered them through the phone records, they were able to see these numbers. These are not numbers that are known to the family, anybody who lived in the house, but they are numbers that were called to an area that has significant connections to the person of interest. The person of interest is also has very significant ties to law enforcement, and perhaps if we were to look back, maybe that's why certain things were or were not done the way maybe they should have been. I'm not here to cast any shade on law enforcement in this case whatsoever, so I'd like to make that really clear. I'm not here to do that in any way, shape, or form. We're talking 1997 to 2024. A lot of things have changed. We know a lot more than what we did at the time, and I'm not here to play that game. But I do believe that it is very likely that information may have gone to certain departments, and perhaps maybe that information was thrown in the trash. Or maybe certain information was not shared in order to tip off other departments about, hey, maybe you should be doing this, or maybe you should do that, or hey, maybe we know about this. So he also, I mentioned that he has a extensive criminal background. And this dates back to before Kimberly Raymer's disappearance to after her disappearance. He continued to get into legal trouble after that. He was out on bond, like I said, at the time of her disappearance. And here's an interesting detail of it all. The person of interest allegedly stole or borrowed, there are conflicting pieces of information about this, but he stole or borrowed a truck the night of Kimberly's disappearance. The next morning, he went to a friend and said he needed to get rid of this truck. When the truck was found, it was found at a church, and it was kind of appeared to have been thoroughly cleaned. Now, the interesting thing about that is the person of interest, in 1991, he had a charge for grand theft of a motor vehicle. He was given 5 years supervision after the fact, but in 1991, so like 6 years before Kimberly Raymer disappears, this person of interest gets convicted of grand theft auto. Now, they also have other charges, most of which are for aggravated assault. These charges, like I said, they span from long before Kimberly disappeared and long after. There are charges for grand theft. Um, and we're going to pull some of the documents out of our files and go over these things in more in depth after I have some more conversations. Burglary, assault, obstruction, obstruction of a police officer in 1993. Again, this is years before Kimberly's disappearance. So he has a lengthy record. By all accounts, I'm really unsure as why he was out in the first place. Again, we know different things now, but we see this happen all the time, that people get out and repeatedly offend. Now, the interesting thing is he has charges in his past and charges he was currently dealing with at the time of Kimberly's disappearance. So we can't say whether or not he for sure did anything malicious to Kimberly that night, but what we can say is it is awfully interesting that somebody with past and facing current charges who may want to be trying to, abide by the law at least until they get off of supervision would go and take someone's vehicle. And what we can say is they tried to then get rid of the vehicle and go abandon it somewhere. Those are pretty bold actions for somebody who is dealing with current serious charges. This definitely would speak to a behavior of a person who is willing to take a risk, to be bold, to act on their own emotions and what they want at the time. So we can say that about this person of interest. He's already displayed in his past criminal behavior that he is willing to do violent, risky, bold actions to get and do what he wants. That's not a good profile when you become a person of interest in a missing persons case. So our person of interest has ties to key areas that would be connected to Kimberly, and they have connections to the area that the phone calls were made from the home that night. They have grand theft auto in their past, assault, obstruction of a police officer, burglary, along with many other things, and they're accused of having taken a vehicle and then abandoned it. Now, if you've got charges on you, if you have charges that you're currently dealing with, whether it's, by way of parole, probation, bond, a pending trial, no matter what, you're really trying. You're trying to be good for a little while, at least, even if it's not in your behavior. Trust me, this is what led me to work on investigations. I come from an entire line of people like this who have done far worse things than what this individual has in his past. And I know how criminals move, and that's what makes me good and skillful at being able to work with others to help further an investigation and progress it down the road in whatever way I possibly can by little tidbits of information I have from my own experience in doing this, but also my own past in dealing with people like this. So you want to be good when you're being watched. It's not hard to figure out. Why would you take a chance on going and taking a vehicle and then going and abandoning it somewhere? A person's going to notice that their vehicle is missing, first of all. So it's not as if this isn't going to eventually be talked about, or he wouldn't eventually be questioned about, hey, dude, where's my truck? So it's a risky move to go and take a vehicle and go and abandon it when you have charges you're dealing with, unrelated charges that are as serious as his are or were at the time. I think it says a lot that happened. When you just look at that incident alone, that this man who has all these other connections and allegedly had an odd interest in Kimberly, he's also stealing a vehicle and abandons it the next morning after her disappearance. Seems panicked, wants to get rid of it. Why? Why would we do that? Well, maybe we're being so bold because we have deep connections to law enforcement in our local area, or there are factors that definitely would contribute to why he felt comfortable being as bold as he has been over the years. We'll get into more about his crimes in another episode, but I believe that there's a very good reason to not consider this a cold case. Now, I want to make a quick apology to the person that was not really happy with me over the last episode title where I mentioned the grand jury. Nope, the grand jury is not new information. I am aware of that. However, I really despise clickbaity information. I despise drama, theatrics, the whole deal. Not really into it. So I agree with you. I understand why you didn't really care for seeing that. And I'm glad that you said something because it goes a little outside of what I normally do. But one of the reasons I did do it is because I'm not sure how many people maybe have shown interest in her case over the years from the public, but didn't know that it later eventually went to the grand jury. So I did want to kind of highlight that. I should have highlighted in a little bit of a better way. So for those that know or knew Kimberly Raymer and are not acquainted with me, I just wanted to make sure that I apologized if for anybody that bothered, and it's really not something that I normally would do. I was curious though how many people realize, specifically how many people who perhaps may have information. So I just wanted to put that out there really quickly. But back to our person of interest here. I believe it is very possible that there could be further information that could be gathered about Kimberly's disappearance if individuals felt safe to come forward. Now, whether that means you know about something, whether that means you were present at the scene, whether that means you had some kind of knowledge after the fact, if you feel uncomfortable or scared, you can always reach out to us at themorningfeed.com. Reach out through our contact page. We're more than happy to have a text, phone call, or email conversation with you to discuss what the process may look like of coming forward. You can anonymously, if you like, discuss what your concerns are about coming forward, and we can work with you and with that local law enforcement department to ensure that you will be safe and protected, and that your information, to the best of everyone's ability, will be kept confidential. Now, he did get a lot of supervision time for his offense in 1997, 15 years. And then there's other charges for us to go over with this person of interest. But I just wanted to kind of skim over these details just to give a little bit of a reminder. Hey, there's a lot on the table here. We may just need a couple more pieces to finish this puzzle. If we could, it's possible that we could even get as far as finding where Kimberly Raymer is today. Finding her remains so she could be properly put to rest. I would say there is no doubt at all that her family completely believes that she is no longer with us. And as devastating as that is, we need to rally behind this family. There's too much on the table. There's a lot of work, a lot that's been gathered to get all of this onto the table. Let's finish it. Let's finish the puzzle. Let's be done with this. This has gone on since 1997. We're now in 2025. Let's move this forward. So, It is solely up to us to not get caught up in the chaotic, high-speed news cycle, to slow down just enough to be able to stay on track with the families that really need our support. And that's primarily what I do. Is I don't really get involved with a lot of high profile cases. A lot of cases I've been involved with become high profile cases, and when that's the situation, I do stay on board. But otherwise, I don't on the onset get involved with something because it's a high profile case. There are way too many out there that need us that are not getting the attention. Um, so again, I want to encourage everybody to keep Kimberly's name out there and her story. We're going to be back to talk about further details about our person of interest. We're going to be able to talk about further details about Kimberly, about who she was, and the important details that really should have been the focus instead of all this. This is absolutely ridiculous. Too much time has passed. This individual, if they are responsible, whoever the individual is who's responsible, has been able to continue on, live their life, possibly commit more crimes, manipulate more people. There's no telling how many people this person of interest has affected even after Kimberly Raymer. And we really can't say how many other horrific things they may have done that we don't even know about at this time. It is a bad situation when you have someone who has a history of charges like this and is also connected to law enforcement in ways that help them out in court. This is a person who becomes emboldened. And if this person of interest is our suspect in this situation, it's very, very concerning. It should be concerning to everyone, not only for justice for Kimberly Raymer and righting the wrong that happened to her, not only for providing her family and loved ones and friends answers, but for public safety. Because whoever did this is capable of doing it to your family, to your neighbor, to your friend, to your coworker. These situations are not only a matter of righting a wrong that was done for a person. It's not a matter of only validation. Some people say closure. It's not that. It's really validation. But it's public safety as well. And that's a big part of our criminal justice system, is to analyze the rate of recidivism, someone's likelihood to continue being a violent individual. There's a lot that goes into how we carry out our criminal justice system. I appreciate everybody listening. I appreciate everybody who supports Kimberly Raymer, who shared out our last episode on social media, specifically on Facebook. We got a lot of shares from people who knew her, who love her, who want to see these answers more than anybody. So let's rally behind them and get them the support. And let's find those couple little puzzle pieces out here walking the earth who happen to know something about Kimberly Raymer.